going to try to go on. All right, we are live on Zoom. What is that?
I will hereby call to order the November 6, 2023 Planning Commission work session. Commission Member Hennis is here. Commission Member Kramer.
Here.
Commission Member Lucas. Not here. Commission Member Whitmore.
Here.
Commission Member Watson. Not here. In addition to citizens attending the work session in person, citizens have several options to view the Zoom meeting webinar as described below. To view the Rockbridge County Planning Commission work session via Zoom webinar, the link is available on the county website. To copy into the address line on your browser. To join by telephone, you may dial into one of the numbers listed on the county website. Webinar ID and password are there for your convenience. Additionally, citizens can also view the work session live or after the fact can do so on the Rockbridge County Planning Commission YouTube channel, also available on the county website. While work sessions are a public meeting, both physically or by Zoom and YouTube, the purpose of work sessions is for staff and the commission to discuss the issue proposed zoning text amendment. The work sessions are not an open forum, open dialogue with the public. As the process continues, both the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors will have opportunities for public comment and involvement. At this time, we will proceed with the work session. Staff will begin the report.
Yes, of course, at the October 11th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting, prior to the Planning Commission meeting, that date, we held a work session, discuss the development of a solar ordinance for utility/community scale solar projects. The work session at that time included a presentation on common trends seen through solar ordinances throughout the Commonwealth. Under current ordinance, a solar project that furnishes electricity to the general public falls under the definition of public utilities. In the package that was provided to y'all via email, of course, available online as well. It included a couple different things. One was the public utility, current definition of the public utility, and a list of the different zoning districts and how public utilities are treated in each district, whether permitted, used by special exception, or in some cases not permitted. For your convenience, staff listed them in your actual agenda item. Won't go over each one of those, but as you know, in all agricultural zoning districts, agricultural limited, A1, agricultural general, A2, and agricultural transitional, AT, they are used by special exception. And to be clear, there's been some feedback since the last Planning Commission meeting, and there's some that are under the impression that once we have a developed ordinance, that we would no longer have a special exception process. And so that's certainly not the intent. And in fact, in the agricultural zoning districts, of the localities we researched, we did not find one that allowed it as a by right use or permitted use in the agricultural zoning districts. Ordinances unique to solar or not, they're always a use by special exception. At the October 11th meeting,
Yes, it's just the public utility, so we're not just solar to.
That would furnish electricity to the general public. Yes, that would not include what I'm now referring to as a single family dwelling scale, solar array, either mounted on the roof or ground mount on array. That would still be considered an accessory structure, is how we treat them, and that would continue to be accessory structure moving forward. In the intent, I should say. At the October 11th work session, staff stated that they would develop a draft ordinance for the November 6th work session, along with the draft ordinance. Included in your package was a list of talking points that the Office of Community Development will start discussing, has discussed in the past with solar developers. Staff will continue to utilize this list and, of course, expand it as needed until an ordinance is adopted. The draft ordinance was developed utilizing the list of the examples of what talking points, if you will, as well as researching ordinances throughout the Commonwealth. The biggest emphasis I want to have on this evening is the purpose of providing the draft ordinance is to have a foundation for the discussion, and the draft ordinance is not meant to be a defining point. I've said it all along that we still have a lot of public involvement. It's a very public process. The Board of Supervisors agenda for the November 13th coming up will 14th, I'm sorry, I'm so used to saying 13th is Monday the 13th, but the 14th will include agenda item of essentially an update of what the planning commission has done the last 2 work sessions. Staff will provide an update. I'm anticipating that that update will generate some discussion on developing this committee. And so I think that is going to be, and that committee is something that we've talked about for a long time now in dealing with the solar projects, or solar ordinances, I should say. And again, the purpose of the draft is just have a foundation to start the discussion and not just have hey, let's start talking about this with a blank slate, sort of to guide the discussion, if you will, but certainly not the defining point. So again, in the attachments, current use of definitions of public utilities, how they're provided, list of points that staff reviews with solar developer, and without further ado, we'll talk about what we're calling the November 2nd, 2023 draft solar ordinance. So I take it that y'all have had some opportunity to review the ordinance. With that being said, I'm going to share my screen for everyone here and in Zoom world. So as you know, Robert Lucas was unable to join us. We have printed out, he provided some comments, and so y'all have those comments in front of you with the yellow message box, if you will, and some corresponding comments behind it. But what I'd like to do is just briefly go over the ordinance, that type of thing. So first of all, it'd be under 717 solar facilities, and it establishes the purpose of the solar development here, and I don't think it's worthwhile reading the entire thing. Okay, so I'll briefly go by it, and please interrupt me, stop me, and that this is meant to be a discussion, obviously. And so it's got the purpose, the goals, the statement of intent, if you will, the purpose of establishing the requirements for the development of utility scale solar fields. So I do think that's important to remember. We're not talking about there are a lot of localities that define what a larger solar ordinance is, utility community scale solar, if you will, and then a residential. I'm sort of reluctant on defining the residential because we don't define a whole lot of things such as pools and all sorts of stuff. They're just considered accessory structures. And so I'd like to continue that trend. But we would need to develop some develop some definitions, and the definitions would be placed under 302, the definition section of the ordinance. So the big thing what the applicability of this particular ordinance, and we left it blank here. We had some ideas, and all these blanks are certainly not meant to be filled in tonight. If we want to have discussion points on it, talking points on it, we certainly can. But again, I am foreseeing a larger public discussion / committee coming out of this. So the applicability as it stands now, requirements set forth in this ordinance shall govern the development of solar facilities exceeding, and we left it blank, obviously. This could be measured in area or megawatts. So, and there's obviously a correlation between the megawatts and acreage. Other localities have used a half acre, and some of them have used megawatts, and that would exceed the largest residential single family dwelling scale one we have like that.
What is the smallest one? I'm thinking the 3 megawatt one out at Carter's Creek. Is that the smallest one that's come before us? Well, Carter's Creek, yes, the one at BARC. So BARC is probably 1.8 acres, something like that, slightly less than 2. It's way less than 3 megawatts. So generally speaking, a megawatt is 8 acres, something like that. So the one in Walker's Creek is a 3 megawatt, and that was about 20 to 21 acres with solar panel. So I do not have the math readily available on what a 1.6, 1.7, 1.8 acre solar field would be. Of course, BARC at the time had plans to do a 10 acre one, but we don't foresee that coming down the near future. Like 3 acres. The one there now is less than 2. It's 1.8 acres, somewhere around there. And so that's the smallest ground array we have by far, short of your 100-foot long ones or 60-foot. David, I know not to put you on your spot, but how long is yours? Or do you have several panels or?
22, and it's probably, roughly 35, 40 feet.
Okay.
In length.
I'm with you.
How many
So
megawatts is that?
It's not even, it doesn't even get into the megawatts.
0.000 something, and I don't know, but so with that being said, I mean, the that was originally gonna be a 10-acre project, BARC, 5 to 10 acres, if I recall correctly. Obviously, the ones we're seeing now, the Mullers Creek, the Walker's Creek project is 3 megawatts, 25 acres. The one, Alexander's is a 40 acres, 5 megawatts, and of course, those are similar sizes pending applications. The one in Gilmore's Mill is 21 acres on the nose, more or less 3 megawatts, and then the one on the Moore track is slated to be 5 megawatts. They say it's 75 acres, but
75 acres,
that's also including a large swath of woods as well. They're including in the developed area because it's essentially preserved for some, I think it's nutrient management credits type thing. So it's certainly
To me,
not.
it makes sense. People understand acres.
Yeah.
I think, to me, I think that would make sense.
So one
to
thing-
make that
Well,
acres.
there's also state law that limits the amount of residential, and I think that would be a good time. Like I couldn't do 3 times what I wanted to do if it's producing twice the amount of electricity that I need to run my house. Basically, I'd be doing a commercial.
Right, becomes commercial.
Yeah, it becomes commercial, so.
And I think it's actually, I think there's different rules and regulations for BA, slightly different, I should say. Both of them slightly exceed 100% of the average consumption. But there are different percentages, so that's a good, that could be a good piggyback off of.
Just to clarify, the state of Virginia says you can't turn your electric meter backwards.
Well, you can exceed, you can exceed, and then you, everything, even a residential scale or single family scale, it all goes back to the grid.
Yeah.
And you can exceed what you're allowed
You can't do
yearly
like
allowance.
2 times or 3
Yeah.
times.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah. And- and-
When it comes to battery storage, which is not here yet, that may be a different set of rules.
Yes, so current, and this has come up here lately, I'm uncertain if the public utility definition, the key is furnishing electricity to the general public. So with that being said, I have not made a determination, if you will, if battery storage is a determination, if battery storage is covered under the existing facility, existing public utilities.
Okay.
And so that is something definitely that we want to piggyback off of this solar facilities ordinance. We do want to add something to battery storage here that has been talked about for sure in the county.
Right.
Now, that's not to say residential scale. I do know single family dwelling scale. I do have a family friend that has an ample amount of battery storage, which is not the norm.
Right.
As far as the cost and, it's one of 3 people I know in Rockbridge County that have some sort of battery storage.
That was one of the questions I had in the definition. I circled general public. What does that mean, the general public? Is it the public here? Is it the public in North Carolina?
It would be the general public. It would not be confined to the 600 some odd square miles of Rockbridge County. Yeah, it would just be the general public.
And also, when it says essential public utility, are solar panels an essential public utility?
So the public, and then we're getting into the definition now.
Well, I was just looking at that, the other thing I had, water supply buildings, reservoirs, wells, elevated and similar essential public utilities under conservation district C1.
Yeah, and that's where, under C1, so oddly enough, talk about that one. I said not permitted, and I did this, in fact, I did this back in 2019, this sort of checklist, if you will. The ordinance states, and this is in the package, conservation district, it's not a formal determination, but it said not permitted. The ordinance states water supply buildings, reservoirs, wells, elevated tanks, and other similar public utility and service structures permitted use. Staff feels that this use, as listed, would only pertain to water-related facilities. So you read those, it's all related to water-related activities.
Yeah, but then it says essential public utility, which power certainly is an essential.
And similar essential public utility and service structures. So similar would be the key word to water supply buildings, reservoirs, wells, elevated tanks, and similar essential utility and service structures.
Solar and conservation. Okay.
And then another point is the large majority of our conservation district is state and federal land, so they would be exempt from the zoning side of things anyway. You know, the national forest guys and solar, it would not come through these guidelines. But that is a good point. So start thinking about that, you know, and that's again, this isn't something I actually had greater than a half acre in there. And right before we obviously put this out fairly late, I apologize. It was, you know, Friday at 5 type thing. With that being said, original draft, we had a half acre, but then I said, well, I don't want to go that far as far as, you know, having a foundation, let's put it that way, a starting point. So that's something to talk about. And we will further research David's point on what is allowed for residential scale. Yeah. I'm starting to call it single family scale.
I used to know, but I've forgotten. The rules change.
Yeah, and that is kind of governed by state law, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then it goes into general guidelines and requirements, and what that says is there's in consideration of any request to modify the provisions of ordinance, planning commission, board of supervisors shall consider the goals set out in 717, which is obviously the definition or the solar facilities chapter, section 717.04, which is in here 201 and 501, as well as good zoning principles and consistency with the comprehensive plan. Consistency, excuse me. With that being said,
Chris,
yes.
do you have this document that you can put up there so these?
Yeah,
folks can see it
absolutely.
too?
Sorry, I wouldn't go as fast. There you go. So the other part of it is the factors considered in granting special exception permits, granting permits for solar facilities. And so these are what y'all, the board of supervisors, y'all is making a recommendation and what the board of supervisors would be looking at. So proximity of the proposed structures to residential structures and residential zoning districts. You know, looking at this in another context with Robert Lucas's comments, you may want to add business districts in there as well. As far as proximity, compatibility with surrounding land uses, topography of the existing site and surrounding area, surrounding tree foliage, coverage and foliage in conjunction with the proposed landscaping buffer plan. Number 5, design of the solar facility with consideration given to design elements to mitigate or eliminate visual obstructionists. Excuse me. Design of the solar facility with consideration given to siting elements that avoid loss of prime farmland, deforestation, karst features, and large grading projects. Get to that here in a second. And then consistency with the comprehensive plan and the purposes served by zoning. So there was some comment made, there were some comments made about prime farmland and what exactly that is in Rockbridge County. So as Tom Stanley reported in some letters that he gave y'all in conjunction with the pending application, I think he stated that there was less than 10% of prime farmland left in Rockbridge County. And so it's a very well defined and mapped, I should say, as far as prime farmland goes. And that's something we've always talked about with the applicants, you know, as far as the prime farmland, you know, and moving forward. I'll leave it at that. Consistency with the comprehensive plan, the purposes served by zoning. And so it's a catch-all. So then this is where a lot of it gets in the road as far as what we're anticipating seeing from application. So the application is the administrative application, then in the site plan. So there are certain site plan requirements in 802.03 that are required with special exception. So in addition to those, what we're sort of looking for, in my opinion, and what we have gotten in most, if not all, applications, are the proposed location layout, including locations for inverters, controllers, transformers, wiring, connector boxes. Keep up with the screen. Connector boxes, switches, and monitoring devices. Number B, proposed landscaping buffer with location, number and types of plantings proposed, including planting heights at the time of planting. C, proposed fencing plan showing location, height, and composition of fencing. D, proposed connections to transmission lines. C, setbacks from property lines and closest off-site dwelling. F, location of existing wetlands and karst features. G, soil types soils of the site per USDA soil survey. Overall height of racking system and solar panels. Proposed locations of erosion and sediment control, stormwater management areas, measures, preliminary grading plan, regenerative ground cover plan, lighting plan, panel specifications, composition, including some anti-glare information, location of knock boxes, that's of course for emergency management survey, emergency management, and then the color photo simulation. So that's something we talked about before. In fact, I think this color photo simulation is verbatim out of our wireless communication facilities chapter. So then it starts to, and interrupt me. So with that, what other things would y'all start thinking about, or what other things would y'all like to see as far as on the actual submitted plans?
That really, to me, that really covers it. When I was looking at it, I thought that was very well done. You know, these things that Robert puts in, I don't think we want to say it has to be 5 feet at the start, or we want to have barbed wire on the top of the fence, because we need to look at each, I mean, that's the whole point of a special permit. Where is it going to be? What does it really need, you know, per permit? I don't think we need to tell somebody that every fence is going to have barbed wire at the top of it.
So that is good. I appreciate you bringing up the comments, because I'll start sort of, he is unable to attend this evening, so I'll start going through his comments. One, he did have, I'll backtrack, 71704, he had avoid prime farmland as identified map on the USDA soil survey.
We covered that on
We covered all of them except for incorporation of ground cover, native grasses, that type of
Which
stuff.
I think
So,
we got over here where it talks about the regenerative ground cover plan, which we got over in the.
well, see, another thing to point out is the 71704 is the factors considered. So it would be beneficial to say in there, you know, the use of, I should say. Because this doesn't say altogether, you know, it does not say, the one here says design a solar facility with consideration giving to siting elements to avoid loss of prime farmland, deforestation, karst topography, karst features, and large grading projects. So that's not to say that they couldn't make an application saying that we're going to eat up all this prime farmland on this particular farm. We're going to utilize all the prime farmland. That's not to say that they couldn't make that application. What that's saying is that will be a factor considered in granting a special exception permit. And so that's important. And it sort of took me a little bit to distinguish 71704 from 71705.
Well,
You know,
one's the application and one, this is what we're looking at.
Exactly, yes. And so we definitely want to expand, well, we want to expand all of it. And again, the biggest thing I want to take away from this is just a foundation, sort of a 10,000 square foot view is what I've been saying. I mean, staff did a lot of work in a small amount of time to get this going, if you will. But with that being said, you know, that's why we left 8 blank. And that's why obviously this next page that we're talking about, we left P blank. So those are definitely to be filled in.
I think if we were going to talk about incorporating a regenerative ground cover, I mean, that goes with the surrounding tree covers and foliage and with proposed landscaping buffer plan. I mean, could you just include it in there, because that's.
And which one are you in? Yes.
Number 4.
Yes, and add ground cover there.
Yeah.
With consideration given to, yeah, no, I agree.
Native ground cover.
Yeah, and so Robert, going back to his comments on 71705, let me get here. On number C, he had the comment of requiring 5 to 6 foot at the time of planting on C. I'm sorry, on B. And we actually had some very similar language in there, but as you know, we do encourage a diverse group of plantings. We don't always get it, but we encourage a diverse group of species. And so with that being said, while, you know, an evergreen at 5 or 6 feet may be appropriate, some sort of shrub or, you know, rhododendron or whatever it may be, is not going to be 5 or 6 feet. So we took that in consideration. And then the second thing, the proposed fence plan, and that is covered. I can't remember. I had notes. The day after the planning commission meeting, ironically enough, I had a pre-scheduled meeting to go talk with the developers of the Walker Street solar field. we thought they owed us some landscaping, but when they, and we thought that because it was a unmowed site for quite some time. That has not been online. They haven't had the interconnectivity from Dominion. That was supposed to be in June. And again, this is the Walker Street Molar project. That was supposed to be in June. That's been pushed till like December now. And so, right, wrong, and different, they were not maintaining the site. We contacted them. We've got a lot of concerns. We contacted them, not necessarily for the lack of maintenance, but also the lack of landscaping. Once they pulled back the grass, the landscaping was in place. We identified a handful, well, more than a handful of trees that need to be replaced, trees and shrubs. But with that being said, the chain link they were able to utilize, and it was a very, very positive discussion on site the day after the planning commission. And we talked a lot about the landscaping needs and everything else, but then we focused gears on, hey, we're getting ready to work on an ordinance, and had probably a 45-minute conversation with them about developing the ordinance. With that being said, their project's done. They have no pending applications or pending applications coming down the pipeline. So it wasn't like a loaded type conversation, but they chose, based on those notes, there's some federal regulations on what type of fence they have to have around the solar projects. And I actually have a picture of that particular fence. This is the fence that actually works. So it's a more of a woven wire fence, and I should have gotten a little bit closer. I did take that picture. I took that picture for lack of buffer. I wanted to point that out on this particular. I'm standing in the solar field looking at the adjacent land on top of this hill. But with that being said, they were able to use more of a farm-friendly fence, if you will, more farm aesthetics of a farm-looking fence, woven wire, that type of thing. And it does have barbed wire on top. I think you always have to have barbed wire on top. But with that being said, we can certainly take Mr. Lucas's comments of the, a minimum 8 foot tall, 6 foot with 2 feet of barbed wire for a total of 8 feet.
So it can be anywhere as long as it's contiguous fencing around to protect the solar panels, whether it's 50 feet away from the panel or next to.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yes.
But there's still gonna be a setback from the neighbor.
Yeah.
Even if the fence is right there up on it, there's still gonna be a setback.
Yeah.
Beside the neighbor's land,
Right.
not gonna put. Right.
And that's another, the real reason I took this picture was to talk about landscaping buffer. So there is no, and when I say landscaping buffer, I mean a man-made landscaping buffer, whether it be 20, 25 feet, 50 feet, or whatever it may be. So this particular project, again, we had a lot of landscaping, a very detailed landscaping plan. It's all been implemented. They do owe us there are some trees that some species that died. They have to come back and do it. But what we're looking at here was no landscaping plan on this side. There was no required buffer. There was no required buffer. And so the molars in this particular case, it's probably 200 feet. But they did not want to get up on the grade because they didn't want to get into the grade and the shadow effect here. But you can see that's where what I was trying to emphasize, I think at the work session last time, in my opinion, in some cases, buffers are required or should be required, if you will. And in some cases like this one, I'm not sure a man-made buffer would do anything, a double row Leland cypresses in this particular case to buffer it away from the neighbor. And that has to do with existing vegetation, but also not necessarily even existing vegetation, but the topography of the land. I mean, granted, someone could be standing on top of their hill looking down and see it, but you're not going to see it from any dwelling or the normal use of the property, if you will.
Well, and I think
In
the
this
whole
particular
point of the
case.
special exception is we're gonna look at each site and say, this needs it, this one.
Absolutely, yes.
So when they bring an application, their plan could be, we don't need it could be, we don't need a plan, or, we feel like with this, right? Is that?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what, we've done that. Well, not to piggyback off of, not to keep on talking about the previous application or pending application, does it say, but we did that in both projects. There was some landscaping. They came with a preliminary landscaping plan. There was no landscaping between the Fitzgerald property and one of the Moore property. We suggested it, same thing with the Gilmore's Mill site. David Whitmore and staff and others went out there, looked at the Gilmore's Mill site, talked about some landscaping, and really in some cases, the lack of, because that was an elevated site, so you're really not gonna do too terribly much with the man-made landscaping buffer, but also we identified the car topography, that type of thing, and they modified their plans accordingly. Yes,
Quick question. So going back to zoning 101 for me, I'm excuse my ignorance. So this ordinance will tie in. I mean, it's going to be a use by special exception in any district.
well, only industrial, only, right now, industrial
Well,
district, yeah, industrial district is
Right.
forbidden use, yes.
So we're outlining what we want to see from the applicant, and then we're outlining what we're gonna take a harder look at. Is the goal of this to put numbers on this? For instance, we mentioned setbacks, are we gonna put like solar array must be 75 feet, 100 feet, 300 feet away from the closest property line on front, back, and side, or, and
I don't know. I don't know where the discussion's gonna go. We certainly could,
Otherwise-
there,
otherwise, we're just outlining information we want from an applicant.
and detailing the factors to be considered during granting the application. And both of those are very important. I'm not trying to,
Right, so I mean, basically you can say, we're gonna look at the setbacks proposed, because again, if you're up against a mountain, and the other neighbors, fence line or whatever's up at the top, but they're like down over the hill, maybe they don't have to be 200 feet off, you know what I mean? I think I really feel like it's case by case, but we
So-
will be
So
looking at the
would
setbacks.
the same thing be accomplished by just coming up with a list of an application, essentially telling them what factors we want up front? And if there's anything we put a hard number on, we would do it. This county will not approve a utility scale solar field. Per IAA says you can't be XX feet from this, and you're proposing to be less than that, then you're gonna have to come back with this, or it will get denied.
and I think that's, and I am anticipating committee, but I think that's some of the larger, I'm not sure we can answer. You do have the ability to do that, absolutely. I mean, that can be done with with an ordinance, and that's why in here, I left the setbacks blank. I think I
Yeah.
said something, we'd be prepared.
That's just an example.
It is, and it's a good example. So this is one, a lot of these things, again, what we did when we looked at this, we utilized the existing wireless facilities as far as the format. Then we looked at other localities and we looked at our checklist, if you will. With that being said, a lot of it, for example, the decommissioning was almost verbatim, with some modifications of Augusta County. So, and I bring that up because I almost put similar language in here, but again, I'm not I don't want this to be perceived as, oh, this is what staff is
Sure.
ramrodding
Yeah,
down. I want to have that public discussion. With that being said, I thought it was interesting that Augusta County has a 200-foot setback from all property lines and 1,000 feet from residentially zoned property. Unless the Board of Supervisors is satisfied with different setbacks, either less or greater, are adequate necessarily to protect the neighbors. And so then setbacks will be decided through conditions of special exception permits. So I thought that was a little,
pretty good.
I thought it was a little bit unusual, but then more I thought about it, it's like, okay, well, here's a starting point. But you have this latitude because of the whole reason what we always go back to, why is it a special exception? Well, it's a special exception because it's unique to that particular project.
Right.
And for example, in a situation like this, you may not need a 200-foot setback. In other ones, you might need a 200-foot setback. In some cases, you might want more, and so that's again, that's why I feel that it's always gonna be a special exception. That's an excellent point.
Robert said a setback should be less than chicken or turkey houses.
And I think that's comment, sorry,
Wait, Minty?
I'm lost. Go ahead and share my
Or if it
screen
really
back.
meant should not be less.
And I'm sorry, we are on this one here. Yeah, it said, the setbacks should be less than chicken or turkey houses. So I think that should be, and I made that comment because I think originally someone had said 300-foot setbacks all the way around. And so, and I said at the meeting, it's 300 foot from property lines for livestock confinement facilities, which is a chicken or turkey house to a certain scale. Currently, those regulations require 300 feet from property lines or 150 foot from the road itself. And I think I made the comment, in my opinion, it would be unusual to require a greater setback than obviously than a poultry facility. Talking about essentially passive use of the property, somewhat passive use of the property, being the solar field.
Gotcha.
And it goes on, the 300 feet from property lines, 150 feet from roads, 600 feet from existing dwellings, 1,000 feet from R1, D1, 1,000 feet from cities and towns, and it does go on, water sources, that type of thing, but they're two different animals, obviously, for, we might go down the wrong road if we start trying to merge those two together.
I mean, I think maybe you could put in some setbacks from certain classification of streams, perennial or intermittent stream. If there's a concern over panels getting broken and whatever's inside them leaching into the ground or getting into surface water. I've heard that before from public, but and generally these things aren't going to be cited that you don't want to cite them that close to a stream for flooding reasons, I would think. But if you want to put numbers on certain things, that would be an easy one to do, maybe plus karst features.
I've jotted down notes, absolutely,
Just I'm thinking out loud.
yeah, no, I think it is, so I wrote down Augusta for setbacks, we're not jumping ahead too much. But Augusta, karst topographies, streams, and floodplain. And floodplain should be in the consideration factors considering granting a special exception permit. 8 would be outside. Outside the 100-year point is what we're talking about. I don't foresee that happening, but it'd be good to have it in there.
So the standard buffer is talking about, this is in 717.13, number 1, and he basically says he thinks it should be 50 feet of a landscape strip.
Yeah, so let me get back, that is on, what number are you on there?
717.13, yeah, and then it's number 1, solar facility shall be landscaped with a buffer of plant materials.
.17
.13
Point.
your landscaping.
1.
Get the head on.
Yeah, no, let me go, we will get
Sorry, we
there.
were
No,
talking
that's
about
okay.
setbacks, so that's
Yeah,
what I
no,
got
we're,
to do.
yeah, so aesthetics, essentially what the aesthetics are saying, the aesthetics chapter, solar facilities shall incorporate design elements to minimize the adverse visual impacts on the community that is minimized. And it starts talking about anti-glare technology, anti-reflective coatings, or other available mitigation techniques, all that meet or exceed industry standards, reduce glare or glint. Number 2, the design of the solar facility and related structures used in conjunction with solar facility shall, to the greatest extent possible, use materials, colors, textures, screening, and landscaping that blend the solar facility to the natural environment. Height, we've never had an issue on height of a solar facility being less than 15 feet tall.
More than.
Exceeding 15, I'm sorry, yeah, exceeding 15 feet tall. And then we did put the public informational meeting in there. It's obviously, and what that is saying is that the public informational meetings are not required, but they're encouraged to have a pre-development meeting, and that's obviously separate from the public hearing process that we're going through. Found some common language on building codes, just put that in there, fairly common language throughout the Commonwealth. And then setbacks, that gets us the setbacks. And so what we put on there is Augusta County language in there, setbacks from karst topography, setbacks from streams, floodplains, we really don't need a setback from because we'll just, we'll essentially prohibit them in the 100-year floodplain. And so we'll piggyback off that conversation. Signage, there are certain, again, the same fencing requirements, there are certain signage that's required. And so that, in my opinion, the signage covers that. Noise, that was a concern previously stated. So that was exactly out of, I don't think Augusta, but I can't remember where we got that. That's 60 decibels. If you need, we can, I think that's a refrigerator running, if I recall correctly, at the property line. That's another thing that we've talked about others with as far as having the inverters and some of the components that make some noise closer inside to the center of the facility, and that has worked in the past. Landscaping. So this is where we were with Mr. Lucas's comment. Number 1, as Melissa was saying, 717.03, number 1, It says solar facilities shall be landscaping with a buffer of plant materials that effectively screen the view of a solar array support equipment and or buildings from adjacent property unless modified by the plan approving authority. The standard buffer will consist of landscaping 20 feet. And that's where I think the special exception comes into play. Let's put it that way. So Mr. Lucas's comment was, setback should be, no, excuse me.
He proposed 50.
50 feet. So looking at the existing ordinance, commercial, a bona fide business to agricultural, a bona fide business agricultural is a 25-foot buffer. And so obviously this is ag to ag. And I also want to reiterate, as I always do, I'm not negating the fact that when this construction is going on, it's a big impact to the community. There are 18-wheelers, construction traffic, everything else. But again, the day after, I took the opportunity to ask the guys and girl on site, as far as what I've always said, a passive use of land. And they said in conjunction, about 3 to 5 days a quarter, they will send a crew there each quarter. So, you're talking 4 weeks out of the year that someone will be on site. Other than that, in fact, Mike Kaiser, the previous CEO, going back to BARC, we inquired with him 2 years after it, went out there toward the solar field, and they hadn't even touched it. He's like, look, we look at the computer and see it's producing, can't remember exactly what it said, high 90s, whatever it was, efficiency, and said, we haven't even touched it. He made the comment that we almost had some concerns on pollen, on top of it. He's like, then we got rainstorm. He's like, but short of that, we haven't even thought about going out there other than maintenance, obviously, mowing it 3 times a year, whatever they do. So with that being said, I say that because of the buffer or distance away buffer, that type of thing. So that's something to consider. What do y'all thought about it?
I think if you say at least 20 feet, if you bring a project and we're like, that's not enough because of a neighbor or whatever, then we have the ability to say, what, it needs to be more than that, or ask them to make it more than that. But I think to say at least 20 feet is reasonable, considering business to ag is 25 feet. 25 feet. Industrial,
bona fide industrial to agricultural is 50 feet. That's bona fide industrial. And I won't go over the list of what's permitted and used by special exception in industrial zoning district.
That's basically a double row of plantings, 20 feet, right?
Somewhat, yes, depending on the plantings, yes. At majority, I should say. And then number 3, it says, so number 2 is another good example. In locations where visual impact and I apologize, some leftover material there, would be minimum due to existing vegetation's distance from property lines and or topography, the landscaping requirement may be reduced or eliminated altogether. And so I think that, I won't pull the picture back up, but I think there's certain examples where a man-made buffer.
He was saying Robert's comment was he thought it should be on every project, and I don't think it should be on every project. I don't think it's necessary on every project. So I would look at it case by case.
Yeah, and that was essentially to strike that too. But I agree. I agree that in some cases in real life situations, it's not. And you're going to have different buffers for different adjacent uses as well, regardless of zoning. And one common one that's coming up is the interstate. Do you buffer it the same and following an interstate property line as you would a private property, or non-interstate, I should say. And I would argue no. You wouldn't have the same setback nor buffer requirement. So then it gets into the decommissioning, and there's a whole lot of decommissioning. And I will say this one is straight from Augusta County, I believe. This we did modify it some, but it is straight from Augusta. I will say the largest one that we did, and Robert has some questions or some questions on here, but we'll go over those in due time, if you will, unless y'all want to. I thought most of it made sense. I will say Augusta County does on 7/17/15 bonding, number A, I added the language, cost estimate from a professional engineer licensed in the Commonwealth who is engaged by the applicant with experience in preparing decommissioning estimates and approved by the locality. So that's all straight out of state law, decommissioning, requirement out of state law. I added that language. They actually have a 25 and plus 25% on theirs. I thought it was interesting. I didn't have an opportunity to talk with Vicky at all about the draft ordinance, let alone now, but I did think that was interesting that they throw a plus 25% on the engineer's estimates. So, you know, $100,000 go up to 125, obviously. So it's
because they're factoring in.
It's not inflation because they do require, of course, this one goes to inflation, you know, the agreements that we have. And to be clear, y'all see the decommissioning plan. And so in the actual special exceptions, it states a decommissioning agreement accepted by the county incorporating the decommissioning plan. So, and in fact, I think one of y'all were asking for the, but it might have been Robert. I need an email. I'll email a sample of the
One of the things he
agreement.
put was to say, you cannot put this in the landfill. I mean, can you say that?
Well, you know, and so we're still working on that. I was somewhat prepared for that one. This is straight out DEQ. So we've had some email correspondence with the director of landfill. He's had some email correspondence with a gentleman from DEQ, guy or girl from DEQ Tuesday. With that being said, this is a list of specialty waste. And so DEQ, in fact, I'm gonna just zoom in. So in some cases, they are landfillable, you know, that's a word. And that's what we got in June of 22. That was the answer that we got, that yes, these are landfillable. That's actually a word I didn't realize until 2022. But with that being said, it's essentially what this is saying, that if, well, I'll let y'all, I won't.
Well, that's kind of, I mean, to say the waste generator is going to determine whether their solar panels have hazardous waste in them. I mean, are we going to trust that somebody's going to be able to?
Well, that's why in the actual information that we're getting, that we're proposing it, I should say, going back to the site plan requirements. One of them, I hope it's in here, is the panel composition and specification. And I won't go.
Saw it somewhere.
Yeah. And I think that's what the DEQ is referring to. In fact, I think it says here. I thought it was said. Numerous types of design, making one size fit all hazardous waste, determining difficult solar panels can be hazardous waste when discarded if representative of the sample waste contains heavy. All right, here we go. The last one. The solar panel manufacturer may be able to assist the generator with information relevant to hazardous waste determination and recycling options. With that being said, one of the pieces of information we're going to get.
Wait, Chris, did you say may supply?
Yes, that's what this says. Yes.
Solar panels
That doesn't
may
mean
be
it- that doesn't mean anything.
Well, that's where we would get an M. So when we get on 1705 M, as in Mary, panel specification composition, including specifications on anti-glare. So with that being said, one draft condition we do that we have utilized, what we.
Yeah.
Over here.
So that's part of their application, is to say this is what's in the solar panel.
But we should go ahead, we really should emphasize more on M, because that's not very clear. You know, it could say something to the effect of number 4 here.
Well, and it also says specification / composition, so they could give a specification, but not necessarily talk about the composition. I think we need to say and composition and not / composition.
Yes, and even include some of this information. This is what you should use and what you should not use. as far as, I'm sorry,
Oh, I like that, yeah.
number 4.
Gen X chemical. Number 4 is still.
So I think that's what, as far as
Yeah.
DEQ, going back to DEQ's website, and this is ongoing discussion, obviously. The panel specific, the solar panel manufacturer may be able to assist, you know, so if we have and someone referred to what it was
Safety data sheet.
safety data sheet. I think, yeah, so maybe,
And
So
this
what-
has come up, several people have mentioned this to me with the China card. That, you know, a lot of stuff that happens over there is not exactly what is real. And that's their point. They may be telling us one thing and it may be something else.
Prove that it's not, we don't know, we have to.
And I don't know why we would ask where it's manufactured. That's not our business.
yeah, no, and I think what could be said about any new world, gold world, you know, third world, whatever you want to say, you know, as far as refrigerators, anything we ever, you know, any of the landfillable processes we
So
have
that goes
now.
back to the, can we just say we don't want them in the landfill?
I don't know, it's good, you know, it's a good, I don't think anybody here can answer that question now, let's put that way. Is that fair enough?
Fair enough. I'm working from the basis that we can't refuse a county business or a county landowner from depositing in the landfill.
But if it's a special exception, we can put any parameters that they agree to in there, right?
Well, they have to be sound, reasonable, and associated with the use of the land, so the sound and reasonable part would be the kicker, you know,
So we
it's.
still have a say in it.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think the safety data sheet and I think the panel specification and composition,
I don't
we'll
think
see where
we,
the discussion.
planning commission, I mean, we, the Rockbridge County.
I think we, the Rockbridge County, would be more than we, the planning commission, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that as far as making a determination, would be the planning commission's role to make a determination if these are landfillable or not. It would be the power to be at the landfill.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Somebody else brought up the fact that in one of the last applications, that actually said if decommissioning didn't happen by the company evaporated, whatever, that it fell back to the landowner who had been leasing the property.
Go back to the county. But they were,
Now, one of them said the landowner, and that's why I think, is that something that we
I don't
can-
think that's enforceable. Maybe example I asked is like, if they have a decommissioning bond of 200,000, then all of a sudden it comes in at 250. And let's say, they bail on the project a year before it's to be decommissioned. The county is in charge of it or has to oversee the decommissioning up to $200,000 worth of the value. And then the landowner would be, I mean, there's no way to enforce a landowner to get rid of the rest of them. I mean, let's say 3/4 of a panel, 15 acres out of 20 get decommissioned with what the bond was. And is there any way, and are we in the business of enforcing a landowner to say, well, you have 5 acres of old panels on your property? Is there any way to say, landowner, you have to get rid of them at your own expense? I don't think there would be.
Well, the landowner is also an applicant.
And they would have found they're leasing that property, which they're getting paid.
They're
for
generating income
Right.
from their allowing the solar company to use their property. So it is better that the landowner provide backup on those decommissioning costs than it is for the citizens as a whole.
Right, because we have amended.
Do we have a vehicle to make that happen?
Well, if we put it in the conditions that both the landowner and the solar company are responsible for executing the decommissioning agreement.
Mhm.
You can force that issue, but that may also undo the deal. Just
Right,
for that landowner,
Yeah.
they may not be willing to go with it if
But
they
maybe
find that they're
maybe that's not a
responsible.
bad thing.
right,
I'm not saying one way or the
No,
other,
I know
I'm
that.
just telling you what could.
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
But we want people are gonna stand, I mean, they must believe in the people if they're gonna lease them the property and whatever, so.
I guess why Augusta County put a certain amount plus 25%.
Possibly. One of the concerns I've had is whether or not the escalation amounts. I think they do a detailed analysis of what the cost would be to decommission. But those escalation fees or percentages are pretty low in today's economy.
Mhm.
They might be fine in 5 years. Or 10 years,
What's the
or
life-
they might be even worse in 10 years.
What's the lifespan of our current landfill?
But we wouldn't get to a point where the fallback would be a lien on their property as a whole.
You could if they don't.
In the decommissioning agreement, you could provide that.
Okay.
I would think so.
I'm with you.
How sticky does that get for the county to enforce?
Liens are not typically that difficult. If you have an agreement specifying that the lien will apply to the property, the county can actually just file the lien. And then the question is whether it's challenged.
If just for discussion purpose, what if the farmer says, hey, you know, it's like my barn is falling down over there. So what?
I was gonna make that point, or
Yeah.
I like, 5 acres of solar panels, I'm gonna graze some sheep on it when they have summertime shade, so
Yeah.
leave them,
My goats like it.
yeah.
That's not what the agreement is. Whatever they sign, whatever that agreement is that they agree to.
Right.
That's what.
Right, exactly, so. I mean,
Well, under under the current agreement, that's not a possibility. Farmer, landowner
can't keep
says,
it, no.
I wanna keep these for, after the process, after lifespan of the cycle is over, and they have 20 acres of solar, they said, we're gonna keep 20 acres of solar, we're not worried about decommissioning. Under a current agreement, that's not an option.
Yeah, I was gonna ask,
Well, as
Well-
long as it's operational, they're
Yes,
not
ma'am.
required to decommission anything.
At the end of the life cycle,
and if they wanna swap out panels and go for another 25, they can, what,
They can do that.
would they have to, there's no time, there's no timetable set, so.
So if we say on there that there's a decommissioning plan for 30 years. And at 30 years, they've swapped out panels and whatever, and they keep on going. Then what happens? Because we only had $200,000 for decommissioning. Well, 50 years from now, it's probably gonna be way more than that.
You have the inflation.
the inflation rate's built in, and we're all concerned about the inflation rate, obviously. I mean, inflation last 2 years to 5 years, is a whole lot different.
So can we not put something in there that says they have to come back before us if they're gonna extend it longer than what the proposed life of the project is?
Well, the proposed life of the project is never definite.
Well, varies.
Because
I'm just saying, it feels like it needs to come back to us so we can say, you know what, now this is not appropriate, this $200,000 number, if you're gonna redo this again, and we wanna look at the new
Yeah.
composition that those new panels are gonna have, because I guarantee it's gonna
Well,
be a lot different in 30 years.
Yeah.
Because it says that it was inactive for the 12 months, and basically that's.
And well, it could be inactive for 12 months if they
Yeah.
wanna swap out panels, it may take them 12 months to swap them out, but.
But it might only take them 6 months, so I mean, I'm just saying, I feel like we need to really think about that, again, long term. You know, what happens at the end of 30 years? I think they need to come back and say, this is what we're gonna do now, we're gonna get different panels, and this is the new composition of the panels we wanna put up, and this is the new decommissioning cost, and I just feel like we need to have that.
Chris, wasn't there an ordinance in one of the towns that they had to do the commission thing every 5 to 7 years?
It was revisit the estimate, I believe, is what it was.
And we've done a decommissioning agreement along those lines too. Where
But
they
no.
reevaluate.
Every 2 years, we reevaluate it. Inflation isn't inflation every 2 years? It rises every 2 years?
One of the plans had that it was 2% per year
2% per
That's
year.
in the calculation.
So
For
they
the
figure out
total
what it is now,
decommissioning
and then they add 2%, so in other words, they're adding 60% over the life of 30 years. they have the price for today and then they add 2% per year, so they're basically adding 60%. And that's how they're arriving at that number at the end of 30 years.
Yes, but 2% is not really a realistic, you know.
I think they figure that's an average rate, isn't that, because that's how they figure out social security and. During COVID, remember, a piece of plywood was $9 and then it was $90, so.
It does say the board of supervisors can extend the time period of removal.
They could.
With approval of an updated
Yeah.
decommissioning plan.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Once they look at that.
Where are we looking at?
I think David, that would add those few words and.
Which one you want?
We also
17, 15.
be within 365 days of the date of abandonment or dismissal. So you could add this period may be extended at the request of the owner or operator upon the approval of the board of supervisors. And then I think that's where you put in with a proposed decommissioning, or with updated commissioning plan, decommissioning.
Hopefully that sound good. Something to weave it somehow in there, or to think about it.
And also, that's one where Robert said he doesn't think it should be 12 months, he thinks about 6 months. I don't know if there's a reason it's 365 days.
No, I mean, not that I know of, I should put it that way.
He wants 6 months instead of 12 months.
It has been, we've gotten a lot of phone calls on the lack of, this Walker's Creek has not been activated. And so I've always put that in the back of my mind. Same thing with cell tower. Actually, we had a cell tower, south of Lexington that went up and wasn't activated for almost a year, if not longer. And that was some fiber issue, getting fiber to the site type thing, if I recall correctly. But I'm always aware of those type of issues as well. But there was some language, but that's all very good discussion, and something that we need to further flush out.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by this section that talks about, he says, landowner has to request buildings be left?
So there's some pretty interesting language in here. There's really no buildings that are associated with. I mean, sometimes you have convex trailers, but any solar project I've seen coming through the pipeline, I should say here, do not have any prefab buildings, that type of thing associated with them. They have concrete, they have footers, that type of thing, and there's some language in here. I think where Robert was going with that, there's some language in here that Augusta County utilized, that we're proposing to utilize, that if they want to retain those concrete slabs and other things as part of saying, hey, we don't want these concrete slabs to go away, we'll utilize them for a building, or to store equipment on, or whatever it may be, that they could request that be incorporated in decommissioning, or not incorporated in decommissioning,
Right.
I should say. Which makes sense to me. I mean, they're very, it's relatively nominal.
So they would just make a request to the board of supervisors in writing, and they would approve and say, yes, you can.
Yes.
So. I think that, why not, if the person doesn't want to pay for it, get those moved, why not make the request?
Sure. No, I think it's a reasonable request. And I think if, and we'll look into other larger scale, because of course, we're seeing small projects, comparatively speaking, throughout the Commonwealth. With that being said, we'll look into other larger projects, and if they do utilize a building, they could have some very large projects. I could assume have a maintenance building, as far as mowers and that type of thing, possibly.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about.
Are we still on?
We are.
17, 14?
Yes.
Okay.
Pretty much lumping them all together as far as the decommissioning 14 and bonding being 15.
think
But
that
yes,
B, it talks about, hazardous materials and waste from the site in accordance with local, state, and federal solid waste disposal. I think it'd be a good idea to include some of that language from, that we were looking at before.
Yeah, that's gonna be
There.
federal regulation. In fact, I'm sorry, that's gonna be state,
State.
Virginia Department of DEQ, yes.
Yeah. So I mean,
So
I
that
think
would
it might
be-
be good to reference that, or at least a website or something, so they can see what we're talking about. Those are what we're gonna be looking at.
Good number, D, that, if I was a developer and I read that, I would think my decommissioning cost would be really, really high. And if I was a landowner and my ground had been stable for 20 years and it really wasn't changed that much, I would argue against that one.
You're talking about restoration of topography, yep.
Yeah.
And
And I know
that's,
you have the caveat unless written request to the board of supervisors by the landowner.
yes,
Which is fine, but, sometimes trying to repair what you did the first time causes more issues than not, but I mean, you know. And then, who's gonna be the keeper of that data? I mean, do you have a survey data of what the topography was pre?
no, but funny enough, I had a conversation with a landowner, about it, just before the meeting, as far as the requirement of, restoration of topography, exactly what this says, to the pre-existing condition. And so they're all over the board in Virginia. In fact, I saw one ordinance or I think condition or ordinance, I can't remember, we can look at this for some time, that they required the stockpile, to be relocated off site and saved for 30 years, and then they were gonna put it back in. So, that will have a long-term factor, especially on the bond. I mean, if you have to, again, restoration of topography of the project to its pre-existing condition, that's, you're gonna talk about bonding.
Yeah.
We could,
Yeah.
that's gonna be significant impact on it.
Yeah.
So he also talks about that down here under B. It says secure the cost of removing the system and restoring the site to its original condition to the extent reasonably possible. And he suggested that we should strike out that and just say it needs to be back to the original condition.
It's never possible to
No.
have it exactly like it was.
The landowner may like the way it
That
is.
language is the standard that's used in everything.
And it's in state law. The part about decommissioning is to has that similar language in it.
Right. I mean, you're never gonna make it what it was.
No,
Because it's been 30 years or, whatever.
Probably
And-
nobody will remember.
Right. Well, that's, I think, what we were asking, how do we know, are we gonna have photos, are we gonna have a survey, there's a tree here and there's a bush here, and there's a couple places where it talks about inflation. Is there a standard rate of inflation that we're gonna use? Is that 2% per year, the standard?
The 2% was in one project. I don't know of any standard.
What's the current?
And
I mean, they must
It's,
have
It's
something.
part of the
inflation.
estimate that the engineer provides. Under CEQA.
IDP, CPIU, whatever inflation factor that is, the government uses. It's probably always behind, but. And I don't know if you want to tie it into any one particular index or.
Might be able to specify a certain rate, based on CPI.
I can,
You need to do that rather, because there's a couple places where it talks about it, but there's gonna be some debate about, well, what is the rate of inflation? Where are we, where is the
Pull that
standard, right? Yeah, I think we need to say this is where we're gonna pull it.
tie it
from.
to an index of some sort.
Done in other agreements, but I think if that's what you wanna use, it should be in the ordinance.
Alright,
What
Yeah.
that
what
is.
that
yes.
index is, what it's tied to, I think that just needs to be fleshed out a bit. Because we talk about it in a couple places about mechanism for inflation, it specifically says including mechanism for inflation in 3-year increments, so what is that gonna be?
Those are good points. So back to the decommissioning, I think I misspoke. It's condition where the extent reasonable possible. State law states decommissioning includes the reasonable restoration is what it
Reasonable.
states, reasonable restoration
That's good.
of real property upon which such solar equipment, facilities, or devices are located, including soil stabilization, and two, revegetation of ground cover of real property. Excuse me, let me read the whole thing. Revegetation of the ground cover of the real property disturbed by the installation of such equipment, facilities, or devices.
Okay.
So slightly different language, but
It all gets back to what's reasonable.
yes.
You know.
And D is a huge one. I mean, if we are going to require restoration of topography of projects to pre-existing condition, you know, it is what it is. And there's certainly, you know, there's bukus of land development, CAD, GIS type thing. You know, 2-foot contours 10, 20 years ago was a pretty major undertaking. Now with LiDAR technology, LiDAR data, it's not as much so far. So you certainly can have pre and post development.
What about any stormwater management features that are installed after decommissioning? I mean, I guess it's on the developer to maintain those for the life of the project, but then have you seen those addressed in any type of decommissioning plan?
Yeah, I don't think, well, I think it would be, but that would be a good idea to specify.
I don't know how you, if you don't restore the topography, you know,
Stormwater management, yeah.
Well, the storm management is for the impermeable area.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so if it's just flat land, you know, you don't have to do stormwater management if you deforest something. You know, there's no
Right.
stormwater management required to create an agricultural field. Let's
Well,
put
if
it
we're
that way.
talking about just posts in the ground, it's not like poured concrete slabs and things like
Yeah.
that.
And that's one thing, and I shared that with y'all when DEQ did it. So originally DEQ had the impression or the determination that the post was if this is the post, this is the ground cover. Originally DEQ said, okay, for calculations, it's only the post. It did not include the solar array, which was a fallacy in my opinion.
Yeah.
They came out and said, effective immediately, it is now the panel as well. I think it took them less than 21 days to come back and say, a lot of
Right.
people's phones were ringing, let's put it that way. I was told the governor didn't even know about what DEQ was doing, and when he got the phone calls, you know, long story short, about, I think it was less than 2 weeks later, they had an update to what was called permeable and unpermeable. Now it has to do with the date of interconnectivity. So if you get a date of interconnectivity, I can't remember, I think it's December of 2024, if I recall correctly, you can come under the old standards of just this, and then anything that interconnectivity after a certain date, again, I think it's December 2024, it has to come under the new regulations that the whole thing is. And that was based on, you know, we heard concerns of noise, and they're legitimate concerns, don't get me wrong, but I've never heard a noise being an issue on other localities. You know, it's there, but I've never heard noise being an issue for surrounding landowners. With that being said, there were some real life examples of stormwater management issues. I think it was Culpeper or somewhere, can't remember exactly where, but there were some pretty significant runoff issues associated with them, so.
So I've also heard people sending me, you know, things about the health, you know, the fact that it causes health issues, you know, we need to make sure it's a certain distance away from people and that kind of thing. I mean, are we gonna look at any of that stuff, or is that just not something that's really our purview?
No, it certainly would be our purview. I mean, the safety, health, and welfare of the general public, absolutely. We can explore that, but I have not.
That would just mean,
Scientific data.
that would get back to our setbacks, you know, in other words,
Somewhat,
across the
yes.
street from a school, are we far enough away that if there are
But if there are health issues with that, wouldn't the state be managing that? I mean, across the state?
Yeah, I have limited comments on it because I haven't seen much supporting data, you know what I
Right,
mean?
no.
the fact that
But
you can find something that'll support any.
Yeah, you Google it.
You know.
yeah, but absolutely, I mean, that's definitely part of the purview as far as the.
And I think
again,
that just
safety,
gets back to
welfare.
setbacks, right?
Yeah.
It
We just
could.
need to make sure we're far enough away from people and children.
Mhm. So one thing as we talked about before, one thing that this does not include is anything on battery storage. And so that's something, and talk about landfill, you know, I would say that would be, a bigger, as big of a discussion, I should say. So we'll start we'll start going down those lines as well. Knowing that, and that has come up, that's come up in other projects, let's put it that way.
When do you think this will be ready to go for public hearing?
You know, again, I don't think, you know, I think we'll get something on the books, I won't say sooner than later, because that doesn't sound very professional. But with that being said, I am expecting on the November 14th meeting for us to have an update to that agenda item will be placed on the Board of Supervisors agenda as far as an update to the solar discussions that the planning commissions had. I'm anticipating based on that discussion that there could be, I should say, some sort of committee form, because we've always talked about that. And so I think I really can't answer that question because I think there's a lot of moving parts moving forward.
So how does that affect the volcano and other, so?
This does not, you know, again.
Before the Board of Supervisors, they'll make their decision.
Yes, I will say, you know, as stated in the meeting, a lot of these can be covered by conditions associated with the
So if
project.
they ask for guidelines, what are you gonna give them?
As far as the same information that was presented to the planning commission, as far as sample conditions, you know, these were actually filled in the blank during planning commission for the particular, and I'm not saying this is a catch-all, this is 9 conditions. You may need 19 more. With that being said, you know, that is we would definitely not recommend, we as staff, if we would recommend anything, we would not recommend approving it without conditions, let's put it that way. And so.
Has the Board of Supervisors, anybody on the Board of Supervisors reached out, or have they all reached out, or I'm just wondering how many?
I've had individual conversations with some of them, and I'm gonna stop sharing now. Back to this, and I apologize that the room looks like this. We were, of course, the election's going on tomorrow, so we were thinking that the Board of Supervisors room was going to be filled up. With that being said, I've had some brief conversations with individuals, but I have not had detailed conversations with any of them, nor have any idea as a consensus as a board as a whole where staff thinks that how they're going to act on applications. Is that fair?
Sure. I'm surprised because it's such a big issue. I would think they might want to know why we voted the way we did or whatever.
They all inquired, and I've just directed them to the YouTube video, and a lot of them do. I mean, a lot of them, you know, we do. In fact, I'm not sure. Normally, we send it's not uncommon, I should say, for us to send a planning commission update the week after the planning commission. In this case, we did do it on the work session and shared them with some information of the work session. I don't think we ever did finalize and send out the update to the planning commission.
I would think this might be helpful for them to have questions when those applicants come before them, because it might generate some additional.
Absolutely, yes.
Some additional questions that they might.
Yeah, and again, how we did this, as stated at the beginning, how we developed this ordinance, how staff developed this ordinance is we took those list of conditions, we took the list of talking points, if you will, and then explored other localities.
And there was discussion at the community development committee, limited about like those things.
Yes.
This is a great start, so. You taking comments or questions?
Absolutely, yes.
Fast in 717.04.
Bear with me here.
Yes.
04.
It would be good to define or tell someone where to go find what the definition of prime farmland is, if it's as defined by the USDA soil survey, or you know, you mentioned Tom Stanley, the extension agent, you know, has a definition for it.
Yes.
But
And so that is covered under 717.05. It says soil types per USDA soil survey. So we can guide them further. But it's very common for solar.
will they say that in the soil survey? You know, well.
Oh, absolutely. It says prime. I mean, is that your?
Yes,
sorry.
that's my question. It's been a while since I looked at one. So
Yeah, no, it says prime farmland.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's
Perfect.
defined as prime farmland. It's very
ignore the comment.
unique definition.
What did
Yes.
you say that the percentage of prime farmland?
Less than 10%. If I recall correctly, it's like 8.6. Tom Stanley's letter stated it was less than 10%. And looking it up. I'll email y'all something. It's actually, I'm gonna email y'all a draft agreement.
How did Augusta and wait, actually didn't look at Rockingham. I mean, you know, half of their county is probably prime farmland, Augusta and Rockingham counties. But did they address that at all?
I don't know, Nick, I'm gonna lean on you towards that. Nick did a lot of the research on other localities, and we can start a SharePoint, because this ordinance, I'm not gonna share it, but this one is all the information we have from Surrey County to Dominion actually gave us a model ordinance, which was, in some cases, less than desirable. With that being said, how did other localities deal with farmland, prime farmland to be unique?
I didn't see much people like specifically pointing out what type of farmland it had to be put on.
I don't recall it in Augusta's
Yeah.
ordinance, but I just proved it as well, yeah.
What made me think about it was somebody bringing up the fact that in the country, it's like 18% of the entire country is prime farmland, which was much lower than what I would have thought, but.
It's unique. I mean, you know, it's unique. In fact, I can't remember the exact percentages, but the more tract has some prime farmland associated with it. The Crawford tract does not.
Yeah.
There is sort of statewide, there is another that goes prime land, and then I think the second category, don't quote me on this, but is soils of statewide significance.
That's right.
And both of them have soils of statewide significance, but prime farmland is unique.
So if it's not prime farmland, you can't grow corn on it, I mean,
I'm not saying you can't grow corn on it. It has to do with the drainage, the topography, the soil type, obviously, is the biggest thing, but yeah.
But on that same one, number 6, the last large grading projects, maybe change that to slopes that require significant grading for facility installation or something along those lines.
One more time, where are you at?
That same one that had prime farmland in it, 17,
Yes,
1704-6.
we're definitely gonna have to expand upon that, and I realize that, Lord, I appreciate it.
large grading project.
Change
What is the definition?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Or you could slopes, you know, you could assume that steeper slopes would require more grading, so slopes that require significant grading for facility installation, something along those lines.
And I think the part of it is that we would get a proposed grading plan.
Yeah.
And I'll say it, I've said it individually, and I'll go ahead and say it now. I was unaware of the I'll call it a mass grading project at the Alexander Farm, you know, and we're certainly more cognitive, there will be more cognitive of that moving forward. And I think we were on both of those. I was surprised on the Crawford track that they were able, that's, you know, it's some 25% or greater slope on that. With that, I don't think they're going on those particular slopes. But with that being said, it was interesting that they have confirmed with their racking developer that they were able to do
minimal to no grading.
Yeah.
So with the Alexander project, will they have to put all that topsoil back?
In my opinion, that was the conversation prior to the meeting. In my opinion, I mean, they'll have to stabilize it they'll have to exactly what the decommissioning agreement said or decommissioning law says.
And that one, it doesn't say it has to be back, you know, put back as reasonably.
Yeah.
Able. Okay.
That field was considered prime farmland.
Yeah, I don't know. I can, it's pretty easy. We have a GIS layer that shows, I should say, have a GIS layer that shows prime versus not prime. So I can get back with you on that, if that was considered prime. I will say that cropland, in reality, it was interesting to see some projects that came through recently, that where the cropland was and where the pasture was, and Lord, I mean, verbatim, I should say, the cropland was defined around the prime farmland. I mean, you could almost overlay it with an aerial photo and be like, wow, there's cropland, you know, and so they were, and purposely avoided those areas, that area, I should say.
So what's the next step?
The next step, I think, is, so this is agenda item on the planning commission. You may notice that I just put that as a placeholder, solar ordinance discussion. And so where that comes from, that's Wednesday, never mind. We'll have a brief discussion at the regular scheduled meeting. With that being said, we might get some citizen comments during the planning commission. We all may get individual comments associated with the draft ordinance. That's exactly what we want. We want feedback. at the appropriate time. I think our next step is to, see what action, if any, the Board of Supervisors takes on Tuesday, the 14th. And maybe that will answer the question whether, I am anticipating, I should say, some conversation of a committee.
Where can we direct citizens to go and see this draft ordinance?
It's all online, absolutely, the same link, yeah, the agenda and the agenda item, the entire package is available online, absolutely.
Would be a good idea to direct them to that. So, get some good input.
Certainly.
Okay.
Very nice.
Yeah, good work.
Good work.
Do we need to have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Yes, I want to make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Very nice. Very nice.